I don't know about you guys, but I'm having terrible flashbacks right now to when I bought that collection of limited edition colors, 90s Les Pauls, and the seller shipped 3 of them in the same giant box. And things were slightly damaged, but this is just supposed to be one guitar, so let's see. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. We're going country this year with the Gibson Chet Atkins Country Gentleman. I've always wanted to document one of these, but when I saw this thing pop up on Reverb from the same seller of that ES355 that we had some fun times documenting, I just knew I had to check this thing out because it's not a regular Country Gentleman. It's from the year 1994, which means we've got a lot of history to cover. Gibson celebrated their 100th anniversary that year, from 1894 through 1994. That is a big deal for any company. And you also have to remember, the custom shop, as we know it today, as a completely separate division from everything else, opens in late 1993. 1994 is that first full year for them. They wanted to do something big. They wanted to do something special. So for each and every single month that year, at a staggering price tag of $10,000 a pop, they did the Centennial Collection. That consisted of a Tobacco Sunburst Firebird, a beautiful cherry ES335, a luscious L5 in the ebony finish, a vintage Sunburst Les Paul Standard, as well as the ultra iconic 3-pickup ebony Les Paul Custom. There was surprisingly a DC Junior in a nice red finish, a very upscale ES355 with Veritone, a Flying V in its modern format in a golden finish, paired also with an Explorer done up very similarly, as well as another Les Paul Standard, this time, 1956 style gold, a black EDS 1275 double neck, and we weren't done with the semi-hollows yet, an ES350T in a nice vintage Sunburst finish. Now, it's important to note that there are other models that had the 100th anniversary banner and decal on it in 1994. For example, check out this Les Paul Studio that we've documented. But many of the models of that year did have something on the guitar somewhere. I mean, for crying out loud, in 1994, they decided to switch up the serial number for the first time since 1977 to the year production number, completely getting rid of year, day, year in a way that you could read it. But the way to know that you have one of the true anniversary models is you have the case that has the blue interior. It's got that cool blue 100th anniversary ribbon. They have a special 12th fret inlay, which you might recognize from being recycled in 2014 for the 120th anniversary. They actually had a large paper COA, as well as a pickguard with a special logo on it. They actually came with a golden ring as case candy. The guitars themselves were adorned with real gold-plated knobs that just aged terribly. A numbered tailpiece. The way they numbered those is they made 100 of each. 1894 was the first one, 1994 is the last. The backside of the headstock was marked with a matching serial number for your first 4 digits, and then the last 2 tells you what run it was. So 1 was for January's release, 2 February, etc. The eye in Gibson is a diamond. Yeah, that's right. There's real diamonds in this guitar. So the headstock diamond's supposed to be at 11 point, whereas the diamonds that were found on the knobs were 5 point. But just like regular diamonds, these were a terrible investment, brand new, adjusted for inflation. Nowadays, $4,000 to $8,500 is the general range, with a few of the more popular ones still getting close to their original retail. So there we go. Today we're documenting the 100th anniversary Country Gentleman. Wait a minute. We didn't say anything about a 100th anniversary Country Gentleman. What on earth is this thing? It was sold to me as a prototype. It could also be like an employee's guitar, but also remember, I just told you guys, beware of models that say that they're 100th anniversary. Do they have the specs that matter? And this one is kind of there. It's got the correct blue case with the shroud, of which you can tell it's been with this guitar for a long time because look, the off-gassing of the arm guard is changing its color. It's got the diamond in the eye. It has the inlay, but it's the wrong shape. It does not have the anniversary pickguard, nor does it have the golden knobs. Kind of a bummer. There's no COA or ring, but we do have the 100th anniversary ribbon that they wrap the guitars with as we saw it when we first unboxed it. So as of right now, I don't see a prototype stamp on this, and I'm personally one of those sticklers where unless it says prototype somewhere, I don't like to call things prototypes. But if we come back here to the serial number, ooh, mid to late 1993, that's when they would have been planning these things. It might be more apropos to call it a research and development model, like when we talked about that really cool SG. Or maybe it's a Fugazi that somebody made. I guess. Hopefully this mystery guitar goes a little bit smoother for us. Now, as far as the detailed history of this one, the guy I got it from bought it from a Gibson employee about 4 years ago. And I did get in contact with him, and he said he got it at a special prototype sale right around the time of the Gibson ownership change. So that'd be around late 2018, early 2019. And here's the thing, that doesn't happen as often anymore because the current ownership has realized, some of these guitars have some really good value. So that's where things on their website, the certified vintage, comes from. Sometimes they'll have prototypes that they have locked away in a vault somewhere, where they have prototypes that they just never sold and have been sitting around for a while. So it seems like this might have been one of those guitars, but it made it out before things became super exclusive as far as that goes. But if anybody else out there has any additional info on this guitar, I'm interested in learning more. But unfortunately, it was not stored properly. If you look at the binding, do you see how wavy it looks? It's because the frets have been expanding on this. It was not in a climate-controlled facility its entire life. And we do have some rather suspicious blood stains in this guitar, so... Oh man, what have I gotten myself into? But anyways, the Country Gentleman. This is a signature model for Chet Atkins. Mr. Guitar, absolutely fantastic player. Generally, when people think of a Country Gentleman, it's a Gretsch, because that's who he was with for the longest of times. But Chet decided to jump ship with them for Gibson in 1986, because they said, hey man, we'll produce those electric nylon string guitars you want, and we've got a much better production capacity than that failing company. But typically, this model will come with what is called thumbnail inlays. So the fact that this one has the ebony fretboard with the block inlays, unless you're Chet or Scotty Moore, you're not getting a gentleman like this. But this model was produced from 1986 till about 2005, and you typically find it in an orange, red, or brown finish with a cool flame top. What's really cool is, despite this being a gold finish, you can still very clearly see it's got a very nicely figured top underneath that paint. Same thing is true on the back. The lacquer sink tells all. So the endoscope should be very interesting. But the way to think about a Country Gentleman is it's basically a thin line L5 is the way I see it. I wonder if the reason they decided not to do this model, because in my opinion it's way cooler than an ES350T, came down to they didn't know how to put the year serialization on the Bigsby without removing the Bigsby branding. Because at least on the tailpiece of the 350T, they still had an area to do that. So to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take a deep dive. Well, about an hour later, it's nice and shiny again, and relatively uneventful. There's a few kind of quirky mysteries that we'll talk about, but I didn't find anything bad. So let's start off with our neck pickup. It's got a Gibson USA base plate. We can tell it's been wax potted. Although just like that 3.5L5, it's got the 4-lead conductor wiring coming out of it. However, when I first pulled the bridge pickup out, I was a little bit confused, because you have something that looks like a 57 Classic with the patent applied for decal on the back. This model actually has a specialized pickup just for it. Typically, it's a 492R. That's right, you heard me right. 492R. It's supposed to be like a slightly under-round 490 as I understand it. And then usually a 490T in the bridge. The bridge reads about 8.16 k ohms. The neck position is a little bit weird. It keeps moving, but it measures around like 16, 17. And then them together is 5.56. It's supposed to be like 5.5, 7. So my first instincts tell me the pickups possibly have been replaced. However, wait till we get the endoscope out, because I don't see that the solder work has been messed with, so it's possible. This could have also just been an employee guitar. They wanted one of these that had all the 100th anniversary appointments to it, and they were able to get some of those cool parts. So it might be they spec'd it out with this. Because here's what you gotta remember. The Gibson USA base plate, that is brand new. We're talking 1993-ish when they start to phase that in. And the 57 Classic was prototyped in around this time as well. So it's a possibility. But now let's check out our pickup cavities. We've got some sort of a date stamp here. Looks like it says the 31st of 1991, and then we missed out on the month. And then down here it's marked BR. Perhaps that stands for brown. They did make them in that color. But brace yourselves for this one. Gibson invented gent. It just wasn't spelled right yet. Obviously, short for gentleman, country gentleman. But according to spec sheets online, these utilize a chromite center block. Now, what is chromite? It's basically balsa wood. However, that will vary year to year, example to example. I've also heard of maple ones, but this is very clearly not maple. But now let's break out our endoscope to learn some more. Going in our base side F-hole, here's those stains we were talking about. The seller presented this as glue stains, and they claimed that they was commonplace. Maybe that's something a dealer told them at one point. However, in my opinion, I don't think that's a glue stain, because you see this right here? That's our toggle switch. There is not supposed to be any glue by your toggle switch. Something was spilled on this guitar at some point, and it seeped through there, and it's running all along your top, because stuff can still slip in here, and then it came into your F-hole, and it's not just going to fall straight down, it's going to wrap around it, and that's kind of why we're seeing what we're seeing here. Because this is what I think when I hear, oh, it's got some glue seepage. It's this kind of more brown stuff, which, yeah, it totally makes sense. That's your spruce bracing along the bottom side. And once again, we're seeing our chromite center block along for the rest of the ride. But down here, we can see some of our kerfed edges, so like a regular ES335. But here you can see what supports my theory of it runs into the F-holes, runs along the side, and then eventually drips down. I think somebody spilled wine in this thing. But now let's go inside our bridge pickup cavity. We can see some more of our wine spill, as well as the flame figuring we were talking about that I knew would be on here in the back. Let's see if we can work our way up to the master volume here. There we go. All that looks pretty good to me. I don't think anything's been touched up. We can see some glue seepage over here. But here's the other side of our center block. You can see the bracing starting up there, but then it gets like severely cut away right here in the bridge pickup cavity, because that's how they get all the wiring through here. And speaking of the wiring, here's what we've got going through it. But man, that must have been some crazy spill, because it would have had to have spilled not only here and there, but also over here. Like, it would have been like an explosion up here to do all that. I'm surprised we don't see any like leaking into the pickup cavities. I thought this was interesting. Underneath our center block here, we've got a little splinter of wood just doing its thing. But now let's switch camera angles to look at the pots. Those two solder joints look fine to me, as does this one over here. And we can see more of the wine stain dripping in on the side. Now, unfortunately, I can't actually read the pot code because it's just slightly covered over. So we'll move to our next one. All the solder work and capacitors look good to me on that, but similar to last time, we cannot read any pot codes. But we do finally have a saving grace on our final pot. You can read it right there, 137 telling us CTS, and then it does indeed date to 1993, 20th something week, and then it gets covered over. But our solder work also looks good here, with nothing that makes me suspicious. However, okay, this is where the gray lead pickup comes off. It looks like they might have just reflowed the existing solder right here, so yeah, I think the neck might have been replaced. I wanted to take some extra time to look just to make sure it wasn't written over on the underside, prototype or something like that. So this is the top of the base side. I'm not seeing anything, so rather uneventful in that aspect. Here's another thing that this gentleman doesn't have that the other ones do. A sound hole sticker. You can kind of see like maybe where glue residue was for one at some point in time, but maybe they removed it when they did all this other fun stuff. But here's why I'm not necessarily all that surprised that the pickups have probably been replaced on this one. We already talked about this guy off-gassing. You can actually see where it's slightly cracking right here. And I do want you to know that is not brittle to the touch, and it cleaned up just fine. And unfortunately, I don't know how to take these things off. I think they're just glued to the top or maybe secured in some other way. But as far as I'm aware, you can't take this guard off. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that this pick guard was replaced at one point in time. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still the good celluloid stuff. It's eventually going to off-gas and shrink and do all the bad things that celluloid guards do. But this is still too flat and perfect. Check out the bracket. It's like slightly bent, but you can see the common off-gassing green to it. But the rest of the guitar has the telltale signs. What you'll look for is the frets in this general area will usually start to turn colors. Now, thankfully, after a little bit of fret polishing, they always come back to normal. but that's probably also the reason why the binding started to separate, because it can affect your plastics there. Will completely eat away the gold. It'll start to turn green and do other weird stuff. If you don't catch it early enough, it can also mess up your finish. So just like the 355, they probably just like, no, these pickups, let's put these other gold ones in it. They're also Gibsons, who's gonna care or ever know? And then our Bigsby here, this might still be the original one. You can see like some weird pitting or something to it, but for the most part, the gold is in good shape. However, the off-gassing will also eat your rubber, and this actually has a little rubber gasket around it that has completely deteriorated away. Usually the side of a Bigsby has a nice little cap on it right here. I could be wrong on this, but it almost looks like the head was shaven off of that. Maybe it had a reaction. So there you go. Love them or hate them. It's another example of celluloid guards just ruining guitars. You have to love the way they look. They really do complement some models. And the reproduction safe stuff just doesn't look anywhere near as good. So it's just something you have to know. If you're going to store a guitar with this, you got to take it off. And apparently don't drink wine around them. Moving on from our pickups, we can talk about our bridge. It's a floating bridge system. You can tell this one's got some scuffs on the top, but most guitars with those will. But here's what it looks like. It is an ebony bridge. You've got kind of a floral pattern on it right there. The backside's looking like so, labeled B. And it's got ABR1 style thumb wheels on it and screws. But I was shocked. It is a Nashville style bridge. And it is an air correct piece, because the early 90s utilized the Made in Germany, where they space it out across the thing. And this one also appears to have some metal spacers under it that you don't normally see. And I had to look at other Country Gentlemen's, and sure enough, that's how they're spec'd. I had someone in the comments section a couple of days ago saying, I wish there was an ABR1 mounted Nashville style bridge. There you go, my friend. Get yourself a Country Gentleman. As far as the Bigsby, it's your typical B7 style. Mounts down here with 3 screws and your strap button. This one is all gold, no black insert. And you put the ball end of the strings on here, and then you use this little spring to give you a slight warble effect as it moves the strings. And fear not, no additional holes over here. Now let's move on over to this side. So if you've never seen one of these things before, you might be curious of how it's laid out. Why are our 4 knobs not with each other? Well, that's because Mr. Chet likes to have a master volume up here so he can cut the sound of the guitar just with one knob. But he also likes to have a knob right here for just the neck and a knob right here just for the bridge. So you technically have 3 volume controls here. Now you can utilize that because maybe you always want your neck pickup to be at like 8.5, but your bridge you want just a little bit less. But you need to talk to your audience or something, and you don't want to mess with your settings. That's kind of what that's for. Now, I'm sure there's other ways you can utilize that, but then this becomes a master tone. Then Gibson doesn't do this a lot, but they do bind the F-holes on this model, so that's something that's fun. The F-holes are single bound, whereas the body is 7-ply along the top. That was a lot to take in. Don't tune out yet. You got other crazy specs over here. So these utilize maple necks, but this is a solid colored finish model, so you can't see it. I guess I haven't looked enough on the backside of the neck to see if we can actually see the flame ridges or not, but I suppose I should give you another view of that on our top now that it's been cleaned, because they do show up a little bit more. That was a really cool unexpected thing on this one. And in case you're wondering, why would Gibson let it leave that? Why didn't they grain fill or sand it down flat? Gotta remember, this is lacquer sink. Over time, this will appear. I don't think you could see that right away. But this utilizes an ebony fretboard with true mother-of-pearl block inlays like a Les Paul Custom. But it looks like whoever made this guitar was just like, let's engrave that particular inlay, but not do the weird banner-looking one. But here's that waviness I was talking about. If you ever see a guitar like this, usually it's fret sprout. Now this one, I think it's a combination of off-gassing pickguard as well as fret sprout. So you can actually feel the frets protruding on this. The good thing is the finish is still intact. It's not like my other Chet prototype that is just almost unplayable. But you start to really notice it about right here. Now as far as these being black speed knobs, it's possible this had the original golden ones and somebody just took it off because, again, It was eaten up by the pick guard, but the black doesn't look half bad. But check out the scale length, the 25.5-inch scale on a Gibson guitar. And I measure closest to a 14-inch fretboard radius. With, wow, 1.75-inch nut width, but only 2.07 by the 12th. I never realized how wide that was right there. But our first fret neck depth is 0.84, but a full 1 by the 10th. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Seems to just be a C-shaped neck. However, as you go to the 12th, it almost gets very light, soft V elements to it, but it's more so the shoulders are just carving away quicker, which makes sense if you're thumb wrapping. But you want to know what's really freaky about this particular guitar? There's no side marker dots. That's interesting. But if you look at a regular one and you zoom in, you'll notice this model is not usually bound on the neck, and it has those thumbnail inlays. So since this one is bound and they changed the inlays up, it's like, oh, usually those thumbnails also show over on the side, I do believe. So I guess maybe that would explain it. That's kind of funny. A quirk, you could say. But now the face of our headstock. Here's where things get kind of interesting. There is a little bit of like delamination / not even coloring within it when you get it in the light. Like almost kind of a yellow haze in this particular area, as well as a little bit over here by our Gibson logo. There is our really cool diamond in the headstock. It's very common for these things to get tons of finish checking in that area, because you got to remember that actually stands proud. It's inset into the headstock, but not necessarily inlaid all the way. Do you want to know another really cool thing about this 1994 example? Yeah, that's right. Flip out winding tuners are not just an 80s thing. They stayed on the jazzy guitars throughout the 90s on select ones. But now check out our crown inlay on this one. I love it. It almost has like a flame figuring pattern to it with perfect lines. It matches perfectly to the flame lines of the top. Our truss rod cover still reads Chet Atkins, and it is engraved through to the white layer. I always love truss rod covers like that. You can also tell those screws have been off-gassed on, as they're a bit rusty, but they still work. Besides finish damage, the off-gassing can also cause finish checking, similar to like what we're seeing right here. Honestly, I think this one's got off easy. I mean, outside of a few golden parts that somebody had replaced at some point in time. But you can surely tell the edges took it the hardest. It's got finish checking all over. But again, it's right there. It's trapped in a case with a shroud on top of it to get it even closer to the guitar. It makes sense. But nothing's brittle. That's the most important thing. But here she is, all cleaned up, strung back up. Actually plays pretty nice after we lowered the action, straightened the neck out a little bit. It's certainly a very nice playable instrument. But moving on to the back, it really was not played all that much. I mean, besides some finish checking that you can see, again, all around the edges, you've got the off-gassing, look to your metal down here, some finish checks by your neck as are common. But other than that, it's really just down here. It looks like this sat on a screw or something and it impressed the finish. And maybe just a couple of dings over here and some mild scuffs towards our center. But just like what you were seeing in the endoscope and on the top, you've got the flame figuring underneath this Goldie. But the back is 5-ply binding. So 7 on top, 5 on the back. I'm not so sure what's going on in this area right here. There's like some weird jankiness to your body. But you do have a 3-ply heel cap. But moving up the neck, thankfully, no finish flaking like we were talking about earlier. This does not feel uncomfortable to play by any means. The only time you notice the bindings kind of jutting out is when you run your fingers like this and you're trying to feel it. So if you're a thumb wrapper, are you going to feel it? It doesn't really feel that different on this side. However, if your hand slides along here, you might notice a slight bump. But now, backside of the headstock, still the Gibson branded tuners. Now, if you take them off, they are a little bit different from the 80s ones as far as their markings. And besides some finish checking stemming from the tuners, everything looks good here. Now, it does not have the ink stamp serial number, but it's got that regular one dating it to the 204th day of 1993, production number 348, made in USA. So now the big question, is this a factory original finish? From what I'm feeling, I think so, but the black light might be able to help us. Oh ho ho! All right. I forgot to mention this. There is almost like a little smudge that you can see, but it's only like that long on the back. But here we have something going on. I don't think it's a crack though. I think it's penetration from whatever spilled inside of this guitar. That would be my guess at first glance. But no additional answers as far as the side, but it all glows evenly. Our neck is looking pretty peachy without any flaky finish. No neck breaks in the common area. Pay close attention to the side of the neck that doesn't have the dot inlays. Now our headstock, wanted to pay extra attention because of that kind of weird colorations, but that's looking good to me. And whoa! Don't store the guitar with the ribbon on it. It does actually discolor the finish. Oh my goodness. That's something to know. It didn't come in contact with the back enough for that to happen. I did not realize that under regular lighting situations, but that's actually really good as far as proving that, yeah, this has been in this condition for a really long time. I would say this looks good, and not that you guys can see it, but it looks like the rest of the wood glows except for where the staining is. So I don't know about that, but I would say the rest looks pretty alright. But all said and done, how much does this gentleman weigh? It's kind of a weird balancing guitar on my scale, pretty much 8 pounds 12 ounces. Let's go ahead and plug it in and hear how these particular pickups sound. And one day I'll have to pick up another one of these to hear the elusive 492R pickup. This has got some really great mellow tones. Love that neck position. But the middle has that nice chiminess to it. The bridge on the clean channel, it's not too striking. It's a little bit more mellow, but I was kind of expecting that on this particular guitar. Now let's see how it handles distortion. I'd say that's pretty good. So there we go, a golden research and development slash prototype loosely 100th anniversary country gentleman. What are my final thoughts on this thing? It was interesting. I've always wanted to try one of these, but I just always feel inferior picking up a Mr. Guitar model and then I can't play as good as him. He's got that great chicken picking stuff. I need to sit down and learn that a little bit more. His version of Mr. Sandman is like one of my favorite guitar songs. But the pickups that are currently in here, honestly, they sound right for this particular model, but it's not what you usually find. So the tones are good, but let me tell you, playing this thing, nah, you don't notice any of the binding stuff, but it's so off-putting not having the side markers. It's a very strange oversight, or somebody purposefully wanted it. It's almost like you're playing a left-handed guitar, but righty, because then you don't have it, but neither sides of the neck have it. So it does take a little bit to get used to. I've never realized how much I rely on those side markers until I played this guitar, but it inspired me to play a bit differently, and that's what a good guitar does. If somebody recognizes this guitar, I would love to know a little bit more about the history, especially who's spilling wine all over this thing. I could see it now, though. They're having this big party, trying to decide stuff. They've got drinks. Oh no, I guess this one's not happening. But we'll have to try another country gentleman another day. I would love to do one of the trans brown ones because I think those are absolutely gorgeous. So all right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.